everyone. Welcome to this interview session with Hemi and Big Brain Holdings. My name is Gonzalo from Impossible Finance. I will be your host today. And today, joining us from Hemi team, we have Max Sanchez, CTO and co-founder, and we have Sam, managing partners at Big Brain. I will start this session with a brief introduction from each of the participants here, and then we'll have a few programmed questions to explore and to get know a little bit more about Hemi Network and market views from Big Brain Holdings. Then we will follow up with some questions from the audience, and yeah, that would be a wrap up after this. So let's not delay this more. Let's get started meeting Max from Hemi. So Max, would you like to join us with a brief introduction about yourself and Hemi?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the stream. My background, I'm Max Sanchez, CTO of Hemi. I've always been interested in cryptography, computer science, economics, so blockchain is just kind of a natural way for all those to fit together. And I've always found consensus protocols very interesting, and so that's the branch of research that I went into. And I've been working on building projects in the crypto industry since about 2014, 2015. And I've been working on this project here, Hemi, for about 3 years now. And as far as what we're doing at Hemi, we're building a dual chain L2. So it's an L2 both to the Bitcoin network and the Ethereum network. And we're also working on new technology that lets people build Bitcoin native applications in a much more expressive and sophisticated way than a lot of the other Bitcoin interoperability solutions. So looking forward to chatting today.
Thanks, Max. We will definitely be diving deeper into this, but let's go ahead and say hi to Sam. Sam, thank you for joining us today, and please go ahead.
Yeah, hey everyone. Sam here from Big Brain Holdings. My background is I was an engineer for about 7 years. Worked in a couple different industries, from oil and gas to biotech to a few startups. My crypto journey really started in 2017 when I participated as a humble retail trader and investor, swept up and blown away by the grand visions that crypto really innovated on and developed on, back from those days, and really went in head first and ever since. And so I joined a hedge fund out of the US for about 1.5 years that was doing a lot of crypto venture and trading. And then I joined Big Brain Holdings about 2.5 years ago.
Thanks, Sam, for the introduction. So I will speak a little bit about myself and Impossible Finance for the ones getting to know me and getting to know Impossible Finance today. So at Impossible Finance, we are an accelerator and a launchpad. We are helping crypto teams from any vertical to scale and grow. We support them with different aspects, from business development to go-to-market, compliance, and so on. With our launchpad and go-to-market services, I think that's our bread and butter. Maybe that's what most people know us for. And my role here at Impossible Finance is working on the research team, trying to find like the next big teams like Hemi. And on my personal background, I started to use crypto just as a means of payment, running my old startup on the health tech space. So I was using stables basically to make payments outside of Argentina due to the regulations in our banking system that are till today are quite horrible. And that was the start of the rabbit hole. I joined Impossible Finance around 2.5 years ago, and really excited to be here to introduce everyone Hemi Network and Big Brain, and ready to start this session. I think the first topic that I would like to dive into is the current state of the Bitcoin layer 2s. So my first question goes directly to Max, and what we really like to tackle right now are any insight that you would like to share on the current Bitcoin ecosystem and how it is positioning itself into the future.
Yeah, good question. I think there's a lot of different projects in the Bitcoin L2 space, and a lot of them are focusing on one vertical of the entire ecosystem. And so the way I see it, at least, you have kind of three important pieces, and then there's kind of a fourth, which is the broader context of those three. But you have a Bitcoin custodianship system. So how are you taking Bitcoin and wrapping it in some way that makes it into an ERC20 or another sort of token standard that you can use in say, an EVM system or whatever. So that's the custodianship wrapping perspective. Then you have Bitcoin staking. What are you doing with the ability to stake Bitcoin either with one of those wrapped versions or natively and be able to use Bitcoin for economic security? Then there's the Bitcoin programmability piece, which is how do you build apps that interact with Bitcoin in some deeper way beyond just being able to use a wrapped version in an existing DeFi application that's ported over to a new EVM environment. And then the fourth is how do you do that all within the broader blockchain context? So are you doing that on an island, or are you doing that in a way that's, say, connected to Ethereum or connected to some other ecosystem? And so as far as the current ecosystem, there's a lot of projects that are focusing on just one version, one of those verticals. So they're only focusing on, how do we build the best Bitcoin bridging wrapping system, and then put an EVM on top of that and call it a day. Or how do we make the best Bitcoin staking system, but you don't have that other on-chain DeFi gadgetry and appliances. It's all purely a Bitcoin staking focused protocol. Or how do you go and interoperate with Bitcoin and write these Bitcoin-aware applications, but it's not in the context of this overall programmable environment that also has tokenized or wrapped Bitcoin, also has Bitcoin staking and other Bitcoin DeFi primitives. And then the fourth is when they're doing one of those verticals, they're usually doing that just in the context of the Bitcoin ecosystem, and they're not connecting that back to other ecosystems. And so what we're doing at Hemi is trying to tackle all of those verticals and also implement Bitcoin security in the best way possible, and do that all within the context of being fully Ethereum connected, Ethereum compatible as well.
Uh, I think that's quite insightful. So let me follow up this. You mentioned a few things or a few problems that that are still open into the space, but the other question is, in order to, let's say, appreciate the builders that are already on the space, is what are the things that these players in the ecosystem have gotten right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's been a ton of innovation in the Bitcoin L2 space. A lot of and a lot of what we're doing with different components of Hemi is building on top or adapting or transforming those technologies to do what we want them to do. So, for example, looking at the Ethereum space, L2s are, they've had 3-4 years to mature now. The technology is really advanced versus kind of the first iteration of L2 technology we saw on the Ethereum side. We're starting to see it on the Bitcoin side too. A lot of the early projects that launched, it was just a EVM bolted onto Bitcoin in some way that didn't really make a lot of sense. And now you have a lot of projects that are doing a lot of innovation in one of those verticals. And so there are some Bitcoin L2s that are doing great work with variants of the BitVM design for that Bitcoin custodianship piece. There's at least one project, everyone knows their name, probably a couple other smaller ones as well, that are doing pretty interesting stuff on the Bitcoin staking side and being able to do that in a non-custodial manner. And we have a different approach, but I think there's already been a lot of innovation and great work in the space on that side. And then on Bitcoin security inheritance, we've seen a lot of different approaches, and I think the different ones apply to different use cases. And so for some chains that are focused on using a certain type of consensus protocol, the way that they've found to inherit Bitcoin security makes sense in their ecosystem. And we're trying to make more of a generalized version that works for many different consensus protocols and is a little more high level and abstracted way than some of the deeper integrations that projects have done that, say, tie Bitcoin security inheritance to the sequencing mechanism. But within those networks, that technology makes sense and has brought value in Bitcoin security in those the context where it's used. So definitely a lot of existing innovation. We're looking at which pieces of that can we reuse, which pieces of that can we combine together in interesting ways, and then for each of those verticals, is there something else that we can do with the way that we've architected our system that does build on what the ecosystem has already developed in that area?
Thanks, Max. Again, I think really insightful and also important to recognize the builders that allows us to build on top and expand the tool that we have to keep building on top of both Ethereum and Bitcoin in this case. Let me go a little bit with Sam. And Sam, the question is to keep on the topic is why Hemi? Why have you guys at Big Brains pick Hemi as your conviction bet in this space?
Sure. Well, before I get into why Hemi, I think I want to lay the foundation for why Bitcoin ecosystem in general. So if we look at Bitcoin today, it's a $2 trillion asset, and there is hardly any velocity on the Bitcoin asset itself. I think the other day, I think one of the blocks, Bitcoin blocks, was actually empty of transactions, and its family established itself as a store of value rather than a money. But what this means is that there's a massive untapped asset base waiting to be unlocked. We already saw some of this opportunity be captured in the last cycle. We saw a lot of private credit deals happen around Bitcoin collateral, but the problem always being with TradFi, was obfuscated, incomposable, and hasn't really hit large scale. And we saw a lot of that credit unwind in the last cycle, and there was a lot of bad actors in the space that was again hidden by the innate obfuscation of TradFi, and all those properties are things that Bitcoin users don't want and are opposed to, and which is why they don't like interacting with TradFi. And so the Bitcoin ecosystem thesis is, and what Hemi enables is, again, the opposite of all of those properties. So it's transparent, composable, and on-chain finance. And the opportunity set, like I said, I think a lot of institutions have estimated about $50 billion of Bitcoin liquidity into L2s in the next couple of years. I personally think that's a severe underestimation. I think that's only about 2% of the total supply today, not even accounting for the increase in Bitcoin price. And so, and also on the other side of what's actually being used in DeFi today, there's only about $15 billion of Bitcoin actually being untapped via, wrapped Bitcoins. So it's extremely small. And primarily that is because of the centralization risks that come with something like a wrapped Bitcoin, where you're trusting really one single provider, which obviously we ideologically opposed to within crypto. And so coming to the Hemi thesis, I think it's pretty self-explanatory, and Max kind of touched on a couple of the points. I think first and foremost, Hemi is the most closely aligned with the virtues of the Bitcoin ecosystem, headed by Jeff, who unfortunately couldn't make it today, but he's an OG Bitcoin core dev himself, and being able to tie the two largest ecosystems in crypto today, Ethereum and Bitcoin, is a massive unlock and distribution mechanism to tie those two worlds together. And the tech, I think, is extremely interesting. I'd like Max to kind of go through that later, but just to also kind of touch on the state of Bitcoin. I think this ties into our thesis for Hemi as well. In my opinion, the first wave of the so-called Bitcoin L2s we saw in the last year or so, came with, unfortunately, a lot of empty promises, broken designs, a lot of centralized, multi-sigs, acting as bridges with little to no close alignment with or leveraging Bitcoin security in any way. This is just emblematic of, I think, how the industry operates. It's extremely opportunistic and very fast moving. And we see this pattern occur in every new emerging vertical. And so not to fault the industry, but it's just how it is. But, as Max also alluded to, there's a lot of really interesting innovation happening with things like ZK rollups as well. But the only problem with that, again, is that it needs a lot of R&D, a lot of capital, and it usually takes a lot of time. I think a good parallel and analogy is if we look at Ethereum's L2 kind of trajectory, we saw OP rollups were extremely practical and hit market quickly, and we're able to build out really robust ecosystems. All the while, ZK rollups were R&Ding in the background and developing in the background. By the time ZK rollups were actually released, they were just too far behind. And so I believe Hemi presents a really compelling and practical solution to this massive opportunity set that what we have with Bitcoin, and with all the facets that we think are critical to success in an endeavor like that.
Thanks, Sam, for your take. I think I need to add, I completely agree with your take regarding untapping the Bitcoin that is in some way inactive or not participating in financial instruments, neither in TradFi and not in DeFi as well. I think one thing at Impossible Finance that we are looking at is how the Bitcoin community reacts to the different opportunities that they have to use their Bitcoin as collateral or in any active way within the financial world. And one of the things that we have been seeing, of course, over the time, as Bitcoin gets more and more accepted, is that how the audience that wants to hold and use Bitcoin gets widened. So right now, Bitcoin is no longer in the hands of, let's say, diehard Marxists that just want to hold their Bitcoin in the most safer way or in the most purest way. And we have TradFi that is bringing Bitcoin exposure to the hands of millions of people through the ETFs. And I think we need a solution like Hemi that allows basically unlocking this Bitcoin liquidity without needing to rely on these centralized traditional finance actors. And I think one of the key things that you were mentioning, like Wrap Bitcoin or Coinbase Bitcoin, or all those Bitcoin representation that we have, both on EVMs or in Solana, are definitely exposed to the risk of depending on single parties or reduced, let's say, sets of custodians that are handling those assets.
That's
So
kind of ironic that the most secure blockchain in the world to use natively becomes one of the least secure ones once you actually move the token to an EVM environment or something. And it's very very against the original Bitcoin ethos there.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge trust assumption that, let's say, a Bitcoin purist needs to make if he wants to actually unlock the interoperability between of his Bitcoin in the EVM world. And definitely, this is one of the problems that we're tackling. I think right now, I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into the technical aspects of Hemi. And I know that we mentioned that we're using both Ethereum and Bitcoin to achieve this interoperability. And I think one really interesting proposal here is let's walk to, let's say, to the path that the transaction makes, since I am approving it on my wallet till it gets finality on Hemi. Max, do you think that you can walk us through it?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess taking a step back, kind of the approach we took to building Hemi was looking at Bitcoin and Ethereum and saying, okay, what things does each network do best? So, okay, Bitcoin is the best for ultimate, completely trustless digital security or digital permanence or finality. Okay, Ethereum has great programmability. Okay, Bitcoin has this amazing asset base that's worth trillions of dollars. Okay, Ethereum is really good for DA and being able to scale out L2 ecosystems. And so we looked at the matrix of what each chain does well and what both chains do well. Both are very good for anti-censorship. And so we structured Hemi's architecture to borrow those best pieces from each network. And so what that means is on the Bitcoin side, we use Bitcoin for long-term security, but we're using the standard L2 approach to immediate security, and we have a plan for decentralizing that using an Ethereum-style proof-of-stake consensus protocol. So getting the best of the speed and regularity benefits of a proof-of-stake protocol, but then backing that up with Bitcoin's proof-of-work. For DA, we're using Ethereum for DA, but that's safer to do because we're using Bitcoin for that ultimate finality. And then for the settlement mechanisms, those you have to design based on the different chains. But on the Ethereum side, we can use a lot of the great existing tech from the L2 space. And on the Bitcoin side, we can adapt some of the work that other projects have been doing with things like BitVM and make a version of that that's compatible with this overall, Ethereum inclusive ecosystem. So to walk through a transaction, the way it works is you're in MetaMask, you sign a transaction, you send it to the Hemi network. that propagates across Hemi's peer-to-peer network of all the opt-get nodes is what the daemon's called. It's basically the execution client of the network. And then those transactions get packaged up by a sequencer into a block on the network. That block gets propagated over the consensus layer of the network, and that block is accepted opportunistically, basically. So people see that it's a valid block, their nodes accept it and process it, but it's not finalized yet. And then there's two levels of finality. The first is Ethereum publication finality. So at some point, a batcher on the network will take all those blocks that have been created recently, and they'll basically compress them together. It's almost like putting them into a zip file, and they'll post that to Ethereum for DA. And at that point, you have Ethereum DA finality for the transaction. And then it can be before, but generally after a little additional period of time, 90 minutes total from when you first sent the transaction, then you achieve Bitcoin finality. And the way Bitcoin finality works is we have this protocol called proof of proof that we created, and it's an additive consensus protocol. And so what it does is it reinforces a consensus protocol with Bitcoin security. And it works by creating this new type of miner called a pop miner, who periodically takes data from a consensus data from the Hemi network and publishes that to Bitcoin. And then the Hemi fork resolution algorithm consults those publications of the Hemi chain on Bitcoin and basically decides what the correct version of the Hemi chain is based on those publications. And after about 9 Bitcoin blocks have elapsed, which is that 90-minute period, then the fork resolution protocol would never choose an alternate chain. And so at that point, you know that you have Bitcoin finality. And if you were to reverse that transaction, you'd have to go and 51% attack Bitcoin itself. So user sends transaction, propagates, gets into a block, that block propagates, that block gets published to Ethereum for DA, that block or a block shortly after it gets published to Ethereum for Bitcoin finality. And once that entire system closes out, your transaction's securely stored on Ethereum and securely finalized by Bitcoin. I think you're on mute.
Thanks. So sorry for that. So that's super interesting. Once we have 9 confirmations on the Bitcoin side, then the finality is achieved, and you actually have to attack Bitcoin in order to modify Hemi state. That's I think that's quite impressive, and this is one of the things that we wanted to highlight about the security on Hemi network. And it's not that before these 9 blocks or 9 happen or passed on Bitcoin, is that you are not protected. Is on the meantime you still have the Ethereum security.
Yeah, you're still getting that native. You're upgrading from like native consensus protocol security on the L2 to then Ethereum DA security, and then finally to Bitcoin security. And so applications can choose what amount of security they need for specific transactions. So if you're buying a coffee at Starbucks, they probably don't need to wait for Bitcoin finality to give you your coffee, right? They're probably good with 1 block confirmation with the L2 consensus protocol. If they want a little more guarantee, they can see it get actually DA published to Ethereum. And if you're buying a $10 million house, they're probably going to want to wait for Bitcoin finality before that transaction clears. So let's applications choose, instead of trading off where we're saying, well, we're getting Bitcoin finality, but it takes longer, we're saying you're building up towards Bitcoin finality, but at each step in that process, you're getting more security that you can trust, and decide what level of trust you want to wait for a particular application, or within an application for transactions of different sizes.
I think that's amazing, and I think one thing to emphasize is that this is only possible because with the Hemi virtual machine, you can actually build applications that are aware of the state of Bitcoin chain. So the builders actually have the possibility to choose which level of security they need in order to, let's say, to execute their transactions or the operations that that are appropriate for the use case. I think now the next topic that I would like to cover, to go a little bit to understand and get more insight from the side of Big Brain, is how does I'm switching a little bit of topic. How does Big Brain Holdings actually conduct your due diligence process, or how does it? How do you guys come to a decision how to back and support one of your portfolio companies?
Sure. So I won't go into detail into our diligence process as much. I probably think people wouldn't be as interested in that. But the way
High
that we
level.
look at investments is that we we are very much founder focused. When we look at a project or a potential investment, we want to understand the founder's motivations, their background and skill set, and understand how much success or forcing function of success they have for the product they're building and in the market they're building in. Um, and so we spend a lot of time trying to understand the founders and their key vision from their standpoint quite thoroughly throughout that process. We'll meet many of the team members. We'll do our best to comprehend, evaluate, and really assess the technical kind of edge and moat that the team is building. And then we'll have an investment committee where all of our partners come on to unanimously vote and approve a deal or not. So yeah, that's at a high level.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. I think on our side, we definitely need to echo. And I think it's not about only the product or the vision, but the fit, let's say the founder market fit, like having a founder team that actually
Exactly.
has in-house all the capabilities, specifically to develop the features of the project or the technology that will make it unique. So from our side at Impossible, it's sometimes the unique selling point of a team is not on the technical side, but it's maybe like their compliance strategy if they are unlocking something new in the RWA space, or their go-to-market strategy if they are building a consumer application that needs to go viral. And in the case of Hemi, definitely what we're seeing is, let's say, a huge challenge on the technical side and a huge challenge as well in the business development side, because we have seen a lot of times great tech, but without the, let's say, the business prowess in order to attract the best builders to expand your ecosystem. We have seen many teams that don't live up to the expectations, let's say. But I think in this case, we have both things covered. We have an amazing technical team with a huge background as contributors in the Bitcoin ecosystem, in the Ethereum ecosystem, a really sound and secure design. And then we will move into the next question, or that I want to bring here is, what are the things that we are looking for on Hemi in terms of latest development, partnerships, milestones, and how are we looking at Hemi's growth in the ecosystem side?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
this
Good
question goes
question.
to Max.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess high level, we're trying to, there's kind of two prongs to attracting people to build on Hemi. So the first is there's tons of existing DeFi gadgetry that's deployed on Solana and Ethereum L2s and Ethereum and this and that, and attracting that to, just deploy what they're already doing on those networks on Hemi, get it working, make sure we have liquidity for the protocols. So that's one piece to it. And then the second piece, which is a little bit of, it takes a little bit longer, is convincing people to come in and use the new functionality, the new Bitcoin programmability, some things we have around Bitcoin security if you're launching a chain, to really understand how those technologies work and build brand new types of applications that utilize that. And so on the I'll call it traditional, but basically the existing application side, we started by largely going after DEXs, lending protocols. We were looking for compatibility with a lot of the existing cross-chain infrastructure. So even though we're doing natively cross-chain stuff with Bitcoin and Ethereum, having connectivity to Solana is also important. And so finding partners who facilitated that and were, the industry standards for building those other roadways to other networks. And then a big part for our strategy has been working with other projects in the Bitcoin ecosystem, the Bitcoin L2 ecosystem, who have some sort of tokenized Bitcoin product. And we're trying to create on Hemi kind of an epicenter of Bitcoin project, not interoperability in the sense of that implies kind of more of a deeper integration, but at least this connectivity to a lot of these other Bitcoin L2s, being able to bring over LSTs and LRTs that are backed by Bitcoin to our ecosystem and do productive things with it, whether that be, you want to trade one Bitcoin LST for another because you're chasing a certain point system, or whether you need liquidity to go and loop up and farm points for one of those projects, or if you're looking for additional yield opportunities for existing yield-bearing assets and having applications that are designed around that, and can do that in the context of having access to Ethereum assets as well, or being able to pair Bitcoin and Ethereum assets together and trade between them more easily. And so we're trying to cast a wide net as far as the projects we're working with, the projects we're partnering with, and we're trying to approach it very collaboratively. So working with other Bitcoin L2s that even on the surface it may look like we're competing in a certain vertical, but in reality we both win if users can come between our ecosystems and create mutual benefit between them. And so I think that's historically crypto's been it's moving more towards being interoperable and being collaborative instead of competitive. And I think that's the right way to approach the space, is work with projects that have communities, that have ecosystems, that have liquidity in their assets, and then find ways to bring them more of that and bring some of the value that they're creating over to your network and share it. And so we're definitely working with a lot of Bitcoin ecosystem projects to do that. And then we also focused quite a bit on things that facilitate some of the more advanced DeFi gadgetry. So not sure what exactly is going to be available, day one versus day 7 or day 30, but we're lining up a bunch of protocols that can do more sophisticated DeFi strategies, DeFi yield farming, smart farming systems, things like futures and options trading on chain with fully backed assets and risk management systems. And so really trying to cast a wide net, focus on DeFi, focus on the intersection between Bitcoin and Ethereum assets, and then what you need to do to bootstrap those protocols to get enough liquidity in them so that people can actually go and use them and get something productive out of it, versus just you have all the pipes built, but there's no water flowing through them.
Thanks. I think there are some great points in there. I think one of them, of course, is interoperability between the different ecosystems. Definitely being a bunch of isolated silos, it has been quite negative for the industry. And as everything is permissionless, you may as well make it as seamless as possible for the users to actually use the different ecosystems that are building both in the Bitcoin and Ethereum space. I think another thing that maybe we can tie into this topic is discussing a little bit how it works, the interoperability with the Bitcoin assets and Ethereum assets through tunnels. I think that's a really interesting topic, a really interesting, let's say, design that you guys at Hemi have built. And I wanted to, take a few minutes to basically describe how these tunnels work and how does it make them different from the usual like bridges or these other type of structures that we usually use.
Yeah, absolutely. So for anyone who's not familiar with kind of our ecosystem terminology, tunnels are bridges, but we call them tunnels because as a chain that's natively connected to Bitcoin and Ethereum, we see that there's a lot of opportunity to take assets from one of those networks through Hemi, or tunnel it through Hemi to the other network. And so this idea of tunneling assets through Hemi, not just bridging them to Hemi, is the inspiration behind the tunneling nomenclature. But yeah, super high level, the tunnels, there's two different tunnel systems. So the first is, and you can also think of tunnels as settlement technologies if you're coming from the tech side of the L2 design space. And so we have the first one, which is the Ethereum tunnel on the Ethereum side. And so that connects to Ethereum using traditional Ethereum L2 settlement technology. So starting off with the Optimism style bridging system. And then we're also planning on in the future adding to that a ZK component with a fallback to the optimistic system. So basically being able to quickly validate things with ZK proofs, but then in the event that, say, there was a compromise of the zero knowledge prover algorithm and you're able to convince it to attest to things that weren't true or whatever, then somebody could basically challenge that system and have it fall back to the optimistic fault dispute. So you only incur that, once we activate that feature, you'd only incur that additional time delay for settlement in the event that someone's willing to spend a significant amount of money, or at least temporarily post it and lose it if they're wrong, to challenge the validity of a ZK proof. And then on the Bitcoin side, we built this, our Bitcoin tunnel system pretty much from scratch. And so part of Hemi's tech stack is what we call HVM, or the Hemi virtual machine. And that's an EVM with a full Bitcoin node running inside of it. And so what that means is it's fully backwards compatible with everything from the Ethereum landscape. So your languages, tooling, infrastructure that you're used to using on Ethereum or other Ethereum L2s, all that works on the HVM. But the HVM also has this Bitcoin full node embedded in it that smart contracts can talk directly to. And so when you look at other Bitcoin programmability solutions, like say the header relay system that's been on Ethereum for close to 10 years now, they only give you a limited view into what Bitcoin's actually doing. So you can look at transactions and blocks, but you can't look at the actual Bitcoin state machine, which is the UTXO table. And if you're looking at like the Ethereum developer experience, when you write a smart contract on an EVM network, you can look at what other contracts on the network are doing, what storage they have in this storage spot of their contract. You can look up the balance of an address, and whether that be a native Ethereum balance or an ERC20 balance, which is really just something stored in some other contract state. You have that full introspection and visibility. And on the Bitcoin side, you don't have that. First, you don't even have a Turing complete language to script in, and for good reason. It's for stability and security. And Bitcoin doesn't want to break a lot of things. They want to do one thing well. But when you're writing Bitcoin applications, whether you're trying to do it on Bitcoin itself or on a network like Ethereum with a Bitcoin header relay system, you don't have access to that deep Bitcoin state machine. You can't see what the balance of a Bitcoin address is. You can't see what's in the UTXO table and whether a certain output is spent or not. And there's a large class of applications, including our tunneling system, or more broadly, Bitcoin custodianship systems, where having that introspection of the UTXO table is very important for detecting that operators are doing something correctly to prevent fraud or detect fraud. Or say you're building a non-custodial DEX, you want to look at UTXOs and the transfer of funds on the network to see when one party filled their end of the deal. And so with that deeper Bitcoin introspection, we use that and built our Bitcoin tunneling system on top of that. And the first version of that is a over-collateralized custodianship system. So anyone can come in and be a custodian. They can post collateral in assets like USDC or USDT or Ethereum, and then perform Bitcoin custodianship on behalf of the network. And then the second version we're working on is taking the BitVM technology and using HVM as this external censorship-resistant observer of Bitcoin consensus, and replacing some of the parts of BitVM right now that are limiting what you can do with the BitVM design. And so because Bitcoin lacks that self-introspection, a lot of the BitVM-based approaches run into an issue where they have to validate inside a Bitcoin script that something else happened on Bitcoin, and the script doesn't have access to introspect Bitcoin and find that. And so there's a lot of workarounds people are trying, and there's some downsides to those. They open up the ability to do ransom attacks against operators and stuff like that. And so we're working on a system where we're using Hemi's view of Bitcoin through HVM. We're able to reflect that back to a Bitcoin script. And so in a Bitcoin script now, you can validate you basically validate a proof that any other state on Bitcoin is true. And that lets you write Bitcoin scripts that do have full self-introspection capabilities. And so that's what we're building our V2 of the tunnel based off of, is BitVM, but with that HVM-powered self-introspection method.
Thanks, Max. So I think recapping what we already have right now out of the gates is everyone can become a custodian as long as you bring an over-collateralized position to basically unlock the Bitcoin from directly the Bitcoin network. And in this new roadmap item, once the BitVM new implementation comes live, then we won't depend even on over-collateralizing these positions, or even the reliance of oracles that need to be informing us about the health of these collateralized positions. So I think this would be a massive unlock, basically taking advantage of the BitVM technology.
And the cool thing there too is because we have that native connectivity to Ethereum, we can bring that wrapped version of Bitcoin once we deploy the BitVM system. That's going to be extremely capital efficient because, like you said, you don't need that over collateralization. And also it's extremely minimal trust. So we're talking, you can have 1,000 or 10,000 participants in sort of a setup ceremony of types, different from like a ZK setup ceremony. But you have the setup ceremony, you can have tons of participants. And as long as one of them is not colluding with the rest of the group, the system is totally secure. And so you can custody millions or billions of dollars of Bitcoin with very, very, very little collateral, just enough to basically keep parties monitoring the system. And then because we have that Ethereum connectivity, we can bring that basically native Bitcoin into the broader Ethereum ecosystem. So instead of using some sort of Bitcoin wrapper that uses the centralized custodianship system like we have today, you can use an asset that is fully backed by Bitcoin using a decentralized, extremely trust minimized protocol. And you can use that completely composably throughout the entire Ethereum DeFi ecosystem. So on Ethereum itself, any Ethereum L2. So not only is it that super secure version of Bitcoin for Hemi, but it's super secure on Ethereum. And when you look at protocols that transfer assets between multiple chains, your token security you're only as secure as your weakest link in that process. And so if you had a super secure BitVM system, but then you're moving that representative asset to the Ethereum ecosystem through some sort of Oracle Observer network or something, for everyone on Ethereum, that asset might as well just be run by an Oracle. And so having this dual connectivity means we can bring it into Hemi super securely, and we can move it to Ethereum with the same security as assets on Ethereum L2s have today.
And I think that's brilliant. And I think one thing to highlight when we are talking about the security of Ethereum layer 2 today is that usually in many cases we have centralized sequencers, and with Hemi we are already tackling it like right out of the gates as well. I think one thing that we can tackle, and this is probably the last question for you, at least from my side, I want to open up to the audience if they want to chime in with further questions. But one of the last topics to tackle is how are we working on the decentralization of the sequencers? How secure and decentralized are the sequencers on Hemi?
Yeah, good question. I think you're very familiar with this answer. So we're working with Impossible Finance. We're doing a node sale, and we'll announce more about that on the public sale information soon. But what we're doing is we're selling, anyone can participate once we decentralize the sequencer. So that's planned for Q3 of 2025. And when we decentralize the sequencer, we're going to be using Ethereum style proof of stake with single slot finality. And so you get that super quick finality, that kind of initial finality moving towards that Bitcoin finality. But that lets us use or have a very decentralized set of sequencers versus a lot of the existing systems that people use, like delegated proof of stake or a Tendermint style proof of stake system. This lets us have extreme decentralization, and it also lets us optimize for liveness over safety. And that sounds like kind of a weird statement, but when you design consensus protocols, there's basically a mathematically guaranteed trade-off that you're gonna have to make, which is, do I optimize for liveness, which is the ability to survive catastrophe and get up and keep moving? Or do you optimize for safety, which is, if you ever fall, you die? And so Ethereum style proof of stake is built heavily around preserving liveness, and that's why we've chosen to use it. And we're able to do so because we have Bitcoin finality securing it. And so with a lot of proof of stake protocols, you have concerns with long range attacks, or kind of the bootstrapping problem, as it's called, where somebody can go and, because proof of stake protocols have what's called weak subjectivity, which is anyone can go, if they have enough private keys that correspond to stake at some point in the network, they can go and create alternate chains for free. Because creating a fork of a proof of stake chain, if you were able to create the original chain, you can create a fork for free. And what that means is, after a while, when some keys have unstaked funds, you could basically take those keys and then go and pretend to be an alternate, or create an alternate looking chain from way back in the chain's history, and basically fake out anyone who's joining the network who doesn't know which chain is correct. And Bitcoin solves that because by publishing Hemi consensus information to Bitcoin and using that for fork resolution, you solve that weak subjectivity issue. You're inheriting strong subjectivity from Bitcoin. And so nobody can go back and retroactively create an alternate correct looking fork because it wouldn't be published to Bitcoin. So it solves that issue with proof of stake protocols in general. And on the other side of the more short-term reorganizations, inheriting Bitcoin security means that if somebody were to try to perform a reorg, well, once you reach Bitcoin finality, it's impossible anyway. And so it lets us choose that liveness preserving protocol that makes the protocol more robust and can withstand any sort of large scale consensus failure and basically auto heal from that. Because users, if they need ultimate security, they can wait for that Bitcoin finality, and we can make that trade off to make sure that the network is as robust as possible and can survive catastrophic events like the global internet splitting into two different networks or something of that nature. And so how we're doing that, basically anyone will be able to, excuse me, stake and become a sequencer on the network, similar to staking on the Ethereum network and being a sequencer who contributes to consensus. And we're doing a node sale where we're selling NFTs that guarantee you a spot as one of those sequencers. So you can buy one of the NFTs that lets you become a sequencer. And then we'll also have a system that's totally independent of the tokenomics of the NFT staking system. You'll also just be able to use native tokens of the network and also participate and contribute to the network's decentralization.
Thanks, Max, for covering this. And I think we, on this same, let's say, answer, we covered a lot of the things that make Hemi secure, both to like long-term or long-range, let's say, attacks and short-term liveness potential threats. I think the next question, I think, in order to broaden up a little bit the topic and maybe get even a little bit outside of the Bitcoin-related ecosystem, I think I want to bring another question for Sam, that is more about how are we seeing, or how are we seeing the evolution or the progress of the overall crypto ecosystem in the upcoming years, let's say, being more broad, and what are the current focus areas for Big Brain, and what are the things that are more, you guys are more looking forward to?
Yeah, sure. So, like I mentioned earlier around the state of Bitcoin, it's a $2 trillion asset. The U.S. government, along with many other nation states, are talking extremely favorably about Bitcoin as a store of value, and to the extreme as a potential reserve asset. I think the massive opportunity here is Bitcoin going forward. That ties in very nicely with a lot of the regulatory lift we're seeing, obviously, especially from the US, around things like RWAs, DeFi, and stablecoins in particular. They become extremely more interesting, and paving way for, I think, true mainstream adoption of blockchain that everyone has been looking for many years now. And I think Bitcoin is neatly very critical and foundational to that potential growth. It acts as underlying collateral, as a foundational asset for a lot of these different composable DeFi Lego blocks that we all use and love within crypto. But to be able to wrap that in an abstracted way that mainstream non-crypto native users can really leverage and use. And I think that's where a lot of like the applications that will be eventually built on and launched on Hemi will be extremely interesting going forward. Another vertical that we're looking at is, as well as probably everyone else in the space, is AI. We've begun to kind of write out a thesis for AI, and formulate kind of how we're thinking about the space and how it interconnects with what crypto enables. I think that crypto is really uniquely positioned to enable and help AI thrive in a lot of different ways. I think if I were to talk about two ways, or maybe three ways, number one, it comes direct to the abstraction point. And so, everyone is becoming more and more familiar with interacting with the likes of ChatGPT to, carry out various daily tasks that they need, whether it's for their jobs or just personal lives. And I think the abstraction and the way that you can tie in intentions, action intentions for crypto activity can be wrapped in a way that is performed by AI agents. So again, it's a foundational aspect of bringing crypto to the masses. I think second point is acts as a financial rail for agents. I think agents will proliferate. Recently, Jensen Huang from NVIDIA mentioned that agents is the next kind of big booming vertical in his opinion, and I think most people would agree. It automates and again abstracts away a lot of like the tedious tasks that people need to do in the daily lives. So a lot of that was solved by Web2 applications, but we take it another level up, I think, with the kind of concept of intents. Um, and then decentralization of AI in general is very fascinating. There's obviously a very strong and high concentration of and monopolization of AI, I guess, for a lack of a better word, power into centralized companies, and I think that can be it can become very dangerous. And not to get into the realm of AI safety, but I think decentralization of AI is critical for everyone going forward, such that um, it doesn't get concentrated. And like I said again, the power of whether that's nation states or conglomerates of companies. So that's obviously a space that we're looking at very very closely.
Oh, thanks, Sam, for sharing. I think definitely, I think that's actually a quite fair concern, and I think something to highlight that we are chasing from behind, right? The large corporations and the nation states have definitely a head start on the concentration of these AI tools. But we have been seeing the space in AI, decentralized AI, growing, I think, impressively fast over the past few years. So definitely is another space that we are also keeping our eyes on. I think in the interest of time, we are running out of time. So this time we will not be taking questions from the audience, but we will have the final 3 to 5 minutes to do some closing remarks. So let's start with Max. If there is anything that you'd like to highlight from this session, or anything that you are looking for or looking forward to that you'd like to share with the audience, okay, this is the time.
Awesome, absolutely. So first, want to thank everyone for coming out and watching the live stream. And then on the Hemi side, we have a lot of exciting stuff coming in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So we're still the exact date's tentative, but we're launching mainnet imminently, likely before the end of February. And so stay tuned for that. And also, if you're interested in building Bitcoin aware applications, maybe you've looked at Bitcoin header relay systems and they haven't done everything you need to build your application, or you're just looking at more interesting, more detailed programming models for getting access to Bitcoin data. If you're looking to build non-custodial Bitcoin applications, please reach out. We're looking for teams that want to build kind of the next generation of bare metal Bitcoin DeFi applications. And we'll also be putting together a bounty slash grants program to basically get those projects bootstrapped. So if you're interested in any of that, please reach out. You can find us on Twitter, Hemi_XYZ, or on our Discord.
Thanks, Max. I think this is definitely something important to highlight. If what we were, if this topic with Hemi and having basically the huge possibility of building Bitcoin state-aware applications within the known tools that are brought by EVM, definitely hit us over Telegram, Discord. We will have the links directly here on the comments on this Twitter link. So please follow Hemi, follow Impossible Finance and Big Brain. But before closing this session, let's hear as well from Sam. Any closing remarks or any final comments on the session?
Yeah, sure. So I want to thank everyone as well, and thanks to Emmy and Impossible Finance for having me as well. Just want to say it's always a pleasure and an amazing hearing Max speak, and I only want to encourage you to do it more. I think it's a very easy to understand and articulate way to unravel kind of the complexities of what's under the hood on Hemi. So yeah, we're all very excited on our side about the launch, and if there's anyone building on Hemi, we would love to speak with you, and we're always looking to invest more into the ecosystem. So I'll leave it there. But thanks, everyone.
Thanks. So thanks, Sam. Thank you, Max, for joining us today and for this great session. I think we at some point went really technical. I think it's like super tempting and really hard to avoid doing so when the depth of the tech stack is so rich. So thanks, Max, for walking us all over the design choices behind Hemi, and really excited to see the next teams that will be building on Hemi and the new applications that will be offering to us. From my side, like even the most, let's say, straightforward or simple, but has a huge value for everyone is unlocking Bitcoin in the most task minimized way on DeFi applications, not only on Hemi, but in the complete DeFi ecosystem built on top of Ethereum as well. So I think that is a wrap from our side. Thanks everyone for joining us, and hope to see you the next time.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam and Gonzalo.
Thanks, guys.